That's
Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vedyadravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So Deepa is not with us tonight. She's well. She's visiting friends in Guerneville. So Vishwa and Setu are with us, and Vishwa will be our chanter for the evening. So we're now in our 4th chapter, and we'll start tonight with the 11th verse.
Let me chant. Can you hear me, Jim?
Yep.
Okay. Chapter 4, verse 11. Ye yathamam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajam yaham mamatvar manuvartante manushya partha sarvasa.
And the English?
In English. In whatever way men approach me, even so do I reward them. My path do men tread in all ways, O son of Pritha.
So this is a marvelous verse. Krishna says, in whatever way people approach the divine, they are really approaching Krishna. This doesn't mean that everybody else is a false god. It means that the infinite has an infinite number of faces. So the divine will show up for people however they choose to approach it. So if you're a Christian, it shows up as the Christian God or Jesus. If you're a Jew, it shows up as the Jewish God. If you're a Muslim, it shows up as Allah. And in Hinduism, it can be Shiva, it can be Vishnu, it can be Brahma, it can be Ayyappa, it can be however you approach the divine. It shows up for you the way you need it. Then he goes on to say that people are always approaching me all the time, even though they don't know it. This is a very important principle. So, what is the human mind? What does it do? The human mind is a pleasure seeker, pain avoider mechanism. It's really quite mechanical. From the moment you get up in the morning until your head hits the pillow at night, the only thing we ever do is seek the good by our understanding of what the good is, and avoid suffering by our understanding of what that is. So if your understanding of the good is, I'm going to be free. Hello, please mute yourself. If your understanding of the good, am I still online? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Jim.
Okay. So if your understanding of the good is being vengeful or being a thief or acquiring money, property, and prestige, in a sense, you may think what you want is the money, property, or prestige, or the love affair, or whatever it is. Krishna's saying what you really want is the Lord. And let's go into the mechanism of this. So, what we do, well, let's back up a sec. Yoga asks us, what is it in the world that has happiness as its dharma? The word dharma has got a wealth of meaning. The primary understanding of it is it's the essence of something, the nature of something, without which it would not be the thing that it is. So it's the essence of fire to burn. It's the dharma of sugar to be sweet. It's the dharma of water to be wet. So, what object in the world has happiness as its essential nature? And if we examine the objects of the world, what we have to see from our direct observation is that people don't acquire or experience happiness from the same objects. What makes one person happy doesn't make another person happy. So where is happiness? Yoga says it's our self nature. So this is what we do. We have a picture in our mind, which we develop mostly from past experience. Sometimes something unique comes into our life and we experience this as pleasurable. But most of the time, it's associations from the past. And I determine that some person, place, thing, or situation is dear to me. We call that priya. So we're going to use the prayer stone here as a stand-in for whatever it is that I have now decided is dear to me, priya. Then what do? I endeavor to get proximate to that person, place, thing, or situation. I build it. I buy it. I marry it. I invest in it. I get the promotion at work. I invest in the stock market. Whatever it is that I think that's going to get me close to what I consider dear. That's called moda. Then, when desire and the object of desire become one, when I get what I want, oh yeah, That's called pramoda, the point of pleasure. In my ignorance, I think the person, place, thing, or condition has given me the happiness. I think the happiness is in the object. But what's really happening is, for a moment, my mind has been freed from its, what we call vikshepa shakti. It's extroverting, it's agitating, it's projecting power. This state is also called the Anandamaya Kosha in Viveka Chudamani, the bliss sheath. We experience this bliss sheath when we satisfy a desire. Some people get more of it than others in life, and that's a function of your past. We experience it fully in deep sleep. Now, what's interesting, everybody loves a deep sleep. But in fact, no external object has caused the bliss of deep sleep. You wake up in the morning and go, oh, I feel so good. I slept so soundly. Everybody loves it. And what's happened in deep sleep is the mind has all been folded up into its seed form. There's no projecting power at all. What the yogi understands is, I've just used the object to get a taste of the mind freed from its agitation, freed from its vikshepa shakti, its projecting power. The truth is, it's myself, meaning the Supreme Self. That's where the happiness is. The old country western song, looking for love in all the wrong places. That's exactly what we're doing. We think it's in the object, but we just used the object to get a taste of our own self-nature. So what is it that has happiness as its dharma? The self. So when I want the fancy car, I think it's the car I want. What I really want is Krishna, myself. I think I want the fabulous wife or husband. It's not that beautiful body I want, it's Krishna. I think I want to make a whole lot of money and get a raise at work. I think it's the promotion that I want. What I really want is Krishna. So everybody is seeking Krishna all the time, meaning they're seeking the self. They're seeking the experience of the mind, freed from its extroversion, its projecting power, so it can come home. Now, we call this experience of the self with the objects a mediated experience of the self. I use a medium to get a taste of my self-nature. What the yogi learns to do is have a non-mediated experience, an immediate experience of the self. The yogi has learned, let go. Give up the vancha, the wanting. Give up the spraha, the longing. Let it go. Instead, let the mind come home. Abide in the self. Now, can you dance with the objects? Of course. But the yogi goes through a very different process. A desire arises in her bosom. I want a widget. No widgets. Okay, I drop it. I let it go. Widgets are there. Oh, I think I'll have a widget. And then when desire and object of desire become one, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Well, that stopped my mind. It stopped its extroversion. It stopped its vancha, its wanting. It stopped its vikshepa shakti. In Viveka Chudamani, there's a wonderful section where Shankara describes the teacher. It says, who's a full knower of the Supreme, meaning under all circumstances. They know, aham brahmasmi, I am that Brahman. But then Shankara says, who has retired into the Supreme, whose mind no longer is addicted to the world. He doesn't extrovert with that kind of longing anymore. Any questions on this? It's an incredibly important notion in yoga.
Jim, I think isn't there something in the scriptures also that says, like, look for the kingdom of God and everything will be granted to you, or something like that?
What Jesus said is, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all the rest will be added unto you. That doesn't mean seek the kingdom of God and then you'll get Rolls Royces and mansions. It means if I were to get a Rolls Royce, how would I feel? Happy. If I were to get $1 billion, how would I feel? Happy. Why not just go for the happiness and not worry about the Rolls Royce or the mansion? Go for the effect of the objects of desire. And then Jesus also said, my kingdom is not of this world. That doesn't mean he's a spaceman. It means the people, places, things, and conditions are trinkets and baubles. It's a light show where he is supreme, meaning where he has mastery. Like any great Mahayogi, is that he revels in the self. He said, I and the Father are one. Now, when Jesus spoke in a full state of yoga, it's true about you and me. But yes, it's right there in Christianity. It's right there in every great religion, because it's a universal truth. Is that helpful, Susili?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions?
Good
Jim, this
evening,
is
Jim.
Fang.
This,
Oh,
oh,
sorry.
yeah, I'll go after you.
Okay. My question is this, which is, on the intellectual level, I understand that this is the case, right? But the question is, in the heat of the moment, when you really want something, right? When you really are trying to avoid something, how do you keep this always in mind so it doesn't slip? Because I sometimes feel like I get this on a normal day to day, but then something might occur and I forget who I am, and it's just practice. Do you have any other like suggestions for not
It's
forgetting?
by watching your mind and making friends. You want to watch your mind when it's in the state of wanting. I used to have a nickname for my mind, Mudha, fool. There I am wanting again. Yoga says there is no other suffering than wanting something you don't have. Now, we'll put physical pain on the shelf, but that's not the biggest problem for most of us. And then watch what happens when you satisfy a desire. But also look, can you be clear personal, right? It was that Fang who asked the question. What is it that you want today?
Today, nothing. Today was a good day.
But go back, remember this week or so.
So I'll give you an example. So there is this business transaction where I'm getting a strong sense that what they're trying to do is um, somewhat illegal actually, and somewhat probably not proper. I think it'll probably not be very beneficial to some other people because of other folks' certain interests, right? And it makes me really annoyed because I have a really strong aversion to like injustice, or to when I feel like certain people are taking advantage of other people. And so it's kind of hard for me to avoid that feeling of aversion because it comes on very strongly, you know?
Mm-hmm. Is this the first time you've had this feeling?
Nope.
Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't work for justice and speak truth to power. But if you are gonna yell at somebody or back out of a deal or something like that, in an effort to get rid of the uncomfortable feeling, it's not going to be successful. And whatever it is that you want, tell me it's the first time you've had this feeling. And if you're honest, you'll see that it's incredibly repetitive. You've had the same feeling over and over again. I was talking with someone this past week, and they broke up with a boyfriend. And this person, she was just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, and she thought this one was going to work out. And at one level, of course, I have great compassion. Oh, I'm so sorry. But for a yogi, is this the first time you felt this? No. Now, I had to be very careful because then her mind says, is there something wrong with me? Am I damaged goods? And I said, no. The problem isn't that this fellow broke up with you. Your problem is attachment. Always, if I'm attached to something, I'm going to suffer. Now, I think she's only known this guy less than a year. She thinks she's having a lot of pain because he dumped her after, a few months. Wait till you've been married 60 years and your spouse dies. That is real pain. And, there's no avoiding it. There's no avoiding it. Because the truth of the world is anything that's in the world of form comes and goes. everything, everything. Enjoy, but don't be attached. It's all temporary. And always understand that the joy that you experience is only a taste of yourself. And Fang, one of the things that we find in this world is we're pretty powerless over other people. Sometimes you can speak truth to power. I had a boss. Many of you know I used to be a church musician. And the particular priest I worked for, in my opinion, was unethical and unjust. So I kindly said, Father, X is unjust. You're hiring someone to say Mass on Saturday night while you go to another parish and sub there when we're paying you is double dipping. It's unethical. It's stealing. Now, I'm a yogi, and I was willing to do that because I was perfectly fine if he decided to fire me. Because inside, I'm a sannyasi. It doesn't mean we don't speak truth to power and that we don't work for justice. But inside, do you get agitated by it? Does it rob you of your serenity? Now, no matter what I said to him, he wasn't going to change. Few people do. So I chose to leave that job because I did not want to work under that kind of circumstance. I don't know if that's useful, Fang.
Yeah, that is, Jim. Thank you.
But if you're greedy, oh, I want to do this deal because there's a whole lot of money for me. And then you compromise your integrity because you're attached to the deal because you want the money. Then you're no different than the unethical people in the deal. And sometimes we're not willing to look at that kind of stuff. Good question. Good question. By and large, I find we can't change other people, but we can speak truth to power. Now, there was another question as well.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Jim. Hey, this is Katie. Good evening.
Hi, Katie.
Hey, this is going a little bit deeper into relationship, whether it's intimate, romantic relationship, friends, community, a sense of belonging. I'm wondering about the role of our fellow humans in touching Krishna and ourselves. And if for one person, it's seeing a beautiful violet flower in nature and there's a moment of seeing clearly truth, feeling the God within you, and for another person it's making sweet love to a lover. And is the role, since we hold on a pedestal the love of an intimate partner as sort of the closest thing to quote unquote real love, is there actually any kind of prioritization? Is the prioritization of fellow humans and touching love completely overblown effectively?
Well, it's different in modern India now, where we've got the Bollywood culture. But in Sanskrit, there is no word for romantic love. Even today, the vast majority of marriages among Indians, even in the diaspora in America, they're arranged. Because the idea is young people are completely incapable of making a sound decision for a partner. They trust their hormones. They think that because it's hot and there's a connection, that this is, oh, the right one. Whereas, the families are a little more sane. They look to see if they have similar values. Do they have similar interests? They look at things that are more enduring, because the hot flame of passion wears off very fast. Very, very fast. You learn to love someone. You grow in love. You don't fall in love. Crash. That's unfortunately what happens to many of us in the West. Now, there are two words in Sanskrit, sniyati and lubyati. Vishwa, are there similar words to those in Hindi?
I can't think of any right now, Jim. I can't think of them off the top of my head.
But anyway, both of them have negative connotations, Katie. One is this kind of oily dependence, and the other is attachment. So most of the time when we think we're loving someone, I'm going to give you a definition of love in the human realm. Love is genuinely wishing the well-being of the other. What most of us do, Swamiji would be very graphic about this. He would say, most of us speak love with our lips and have lust in our heart. And I would define lust as I want something from the other person. Approval, connection, good sex, attention, all these things. And if that person gives all this stuff to me, I'm getting my desires met. And that's where attachment starts to develop. Now, going off and joining a monastery is not the solution, because in a monastery, you walk in the front door, or an ashram, and you don't marry one person, you marry 20, and you've never met them before. And you don't even get laid. And all the problems of relationship are right there. So relationship can be a place to do wonderful sadhana, spiritual practice, but it's always about looking at what our own part is, what our own defects of character are, being honest, being vulnerable, and in terms of how we relate to the other person, endeavoring to practice unconditional love, which is very hard. In Hinduism, we say it's so hard that it takes 7 lifetimes with one person in order to really do it. You don't marry somebody for just one lifetime. You marry him for 7 lifetimes to be able to really, truly love. But again, the biggest delusion that we have is we think it's the other person. And the truth is, when you have your beloved in your arms, the greatest love that you're feeling is a taste of your self-nature. I don't know if that's useful, Katie.
That was amazing. Thank you, Jim.
But we tend to romanticize and dress our attachment, our wanting up with Valentines and roses, when what I'm really in is a state of wanting, of lust, of attachment, of wanting my needs met. Our needs, in fact, are very few. Food, clothing, and shelter. That's about it. All the rest are wants. Now, nature has set it up that when you are partnering with another human being, all the hormones start to fire. You know, the lizard brain just goes bananas. So we cut ourselves a lot of slack. That kind of attachment is part of our genetic makeup. Very good question. Very good question. Now, interesting little historical thing. So in Western culture, we frequently will have, like with the Mormons, polygamy. One man will have several wives. Well, Arjuna's wife had 5 husbands. Wonder how she worked that one out. Very interesting. All right. So, any other questions, and we'll move on. Vishwa, will you read the English of that verse 11 again, so that we, with our discussion, we can hold it in context?
Sure, Jim. The English for verse 11. In whatever way men approach me, even so do I reward them. My path do men tread in all ways, O son of Pritha.
Yes. All right, number 12.
Okay, verse 12. Kansantha karmanam siddhim yajanta iha devata sipram hi manusya loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Then the English for 12. They who long for satisfaction from actions in this world make sacrifices to the gods, because satisfaction is quickly obtained from actions in the world of objects.
So the word here is deva, and it comes from the root div, which means to shine. Sometimes it's translated as demigods. But when we see the term deva here in Gita, it has one of 3 meanings. This is the mystic symbolism. It is the presiding principle over a field of human endeavor, or it can be the presiding principle over a force of nature, like Vayu is the wind and Varuna is the ocean. Sometimes it means the sense organs. What we're dealing with here is the presiding principle over a field of human endeavor. So let me give you a concrete example. So if an ordinary Indian opens up, let's say, a shop, a store, or a business, frequently what they will do is they'll have a little altar, a mandir, and they'll install a deity there. So what deity do they usually put? Any of our Indian people here tonight, what deity is usually there in a business?
Lakshmi.
Yeah, why?
Because she's the goddess of wealth and good luck and fortune.
Yep. And then before you open the business or on the first day of business, what do you usually do?
You do a Lakshmi puja.
You hire the local pujari, the local priest, who does a puja. So you want to propitiate the deity so you can get rich. Now, the deeper meaning of this, the other idea of the rituals we do to propitiate. So let's say you want to be a computer programmer. So that's the deity you want to propitiate. What you do is you go learn how to do programming. You learn these languages. What is it? Java and C++, and I don't even know what they have. I'm going back 20 years to computer languages. If you want to be a structural engineer and build bridges, how do you propitiate the structural engineering god? You go to the university, you get an engineering degree. If you want to be a musician, what do you do to propitiate the music god? You get a music education and you practice your art. So these actions that we do to propitiate the presiding principle over our field of endeavor, this is our puja. This is our propitiation of the god. Through that, we get what we want. So if you want a better job as a computer programmer and you need to learn, say, Salesforce, is that a program that people use still?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah. Okay. So you learn this program so you can market yourself. Yes, I know this program. You see, so the fruits that you get, the rewards, are temporal. Temporal doesn't just mean worldly, it means also in time. So they're easy to achieve, but alas, they're temporary as well. So this is the kind of worship that most people are doing. They're doing deva yajna, sacrifice to the devas. What they really want is the bliss of the self, but they're involved in these various activities of the world. There's nothing wrong with that. But we never get an infinite, enduring satisfaction from doing them. This is why we have midlife crises. People spend the first 20, 30, 40 years of their life going for the brass ring. They get it and they go, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's, got its ups and downs like anything else. And there's always the taint of sorrow. Oh, I really want to be a teacher. I really want to be a teacher. And then every year you get 8th grade boys in the math class who are monsters. Or you really want to work with children, in early development. It's so important. And then all of a sudden budgets are cut. Or COVID comes along, or parents are screaming and yelling at you. You never escape that every pleasure or success is tinged with sorrow. That's the world. That's the world. And if we invest in these outcomes as the sole source of our happiness, we may get a little juice, but it's very temporary and it's always takes a lot of work. I had a teacher who used to say it's 95 cents worth of work for a nickel's worth of pleasure. It's bad economics. Bad economics. Next one.
Sure, Jim. Next one. 13. chaturranyam maya shratstam guna karma vibhagasa tasya katarampi mam vidya kataram vavyayam. And the English, the fourfold caste has been created by me according to the differentiation of guna and karma. Though I am the author thereof, know me as non-doer and immutable.
So this has been a verse that the upper classes in India, the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, have used to keep the lower classes, what they call the scheduled classes, etc., in servitude for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Chatur Varna, for Chatur Varna, means caste. It actually also means color. The word caste, by the way, caste, hue, means a shade of color. So even in English, the word has that connotation. The castes, as they've been laid out in the Vedic scripture, are four. The first are the Brahmanas. They're the priest class. Their job is to be scholars and priests, to be holders of the cultural values, teachers in that sense. Second class caste is the Kshatriyas, the warrior caste. They're to be warriors, also kings. Frequently they can be like judges or attorneys as well. The third one is the Vaishyas. These are the merchants, those involved with the production and the distribution of goods and services in the society. Shudras are those who work with their hands, what we would call laborers. Now notice, Krishna does not say, I am the author of the fourfold caste according to birth, Janma. This has been a huge sin that has made its way into Hindu culture. Guna and karma means qualities of mind and the actions you perform. The entire world, not just Hindu culture, is divided into these fourfold large groups of how people function in a healthy society. And it's not based on the color of your skin or your family background. It's the qualities of your mind and the actions you perform. And all four branches of the human society are essential. None is more noble than the other. There is dignity in being an essential worker. You might say all workers are essential. The person who picks the crops is as important as the judge who sits on the court. The person who cleans the house deserves as much dignity and respect as the priest. So Swamiji railed against the bondage of the caste system as it evolved historically. In America, we have our own caste system. We have systemic structures that keep classes of people downtrodden. Others, because of the color of their skin, generational wealth, have enormous privilege. And our school system, our housing system, we have all these things that create a de facto caste system in our country. And it's just as much a sin in America as it is in India. So I'm not pointing any finger at India that I'm not saying isn't true, frankly, about most societies. These are structural inequities, systemic inequalities, inequities, and racism. They're there. Now, after Swamiji would talk about this, so he would say, I don't care if you've been born a Brahmana and you have the sacred thread. If you're out there in the marketplace and all that you're interested in is making money, you're nothing but a merchant. But if, on the other hand, you come from an marginalized community, whether in India or the United States, but in your heart, you aspire to a life of spirituality. You can't help yourself. You seek this. You love to pray. And at some point, you have this desire to know the self. Doesn't matter what your background is. Then, because of guna and karma, you're a Brahmana. And we have those in India. There's a very famous contemporary guru, Amaji, the hugging guru. You all know of her. She's from a poor fishing village. Her caste is very low, but she's a saint. And there are proud Brahmanas who have none of the qualities that come from they don't have the perfumed character that comes from years of spiritual practice. All they have is the arrogance of birth. Any questions about this? I acknowledge for a white guy to be speaking about justice in the caste system from outside the culture is not the wisest. This message would come better from someone within that culture. But what I'm saying is exactly what Swamiji said. Any thoughts on any of this? All right, next verse.
Okay, next verse, Jim. 14. Namam kamarnilim panti name karma phale spriha iti mam yo bhijanati karma bhirna sabadhyate. 14. Actions do not taint me. nor have I any desire for the fruits of actions. He who knows me thus is not bound by his actions.
So there was a piece of the last verse that moves right into that. Though he is the author of the fourfold cast, none of this touches him. What does that mean? The self in me and the self in you is the same. If you are a person with a great education and say a professor or a priest, and someone else is a carpenter or a garbage person, the self in one and the self in the other, they are the same. The actions do not touch me. Now, in ancient India, as in Western culture in earlier times, society was far more stratified. We do have a term in Sanskrit called jati. I think it's also a Hindu term. One of our Indian people. What's jati?
Does jati mean, I guess, what you're born into, your kind?
Your family occupation.
Yes, yes.
Your family occupation. So your family may be cooks. Your family may be priests. Your family may be barbers. It's very interesting. In the West, you can tell what some of these more ancient jobs were by people's names. So if someone's last name is Smith, guess what their family did? They were smithies. I have a very dear friend, and his last name is Pigford, spelled with two G's, Piggford. Guess what that is? A pig ford is the shallow spot in the river where you brought your pigs across. They were pig farmers. People have a last name of farmer. People have a last name of Goldman. They were bankers. So we find that this idea of jati occurs in the West as well as in the East. So what people tended to do is go into the same profession that their family did. It's very interesting. In, for example, my profession, music, most, not all, world-class musicians came from musical families. They grew up with it. So they started making music at a very young age. So even though it's not stratified like it was at one time in our history, these vestiges are still there in our modern society. But one of the things we have now in India, as well as in the United States, is we have far more economic and social mobility. People can get an education. They can move into social and economic structures that are very different from what they were born into. I have a very dear friend who makes just scary amounts of money. He works in a very arcane field. He's a computer programmer and he works in cyber security for industry. But he grew up in the rural Midwest, with a single mother, and they were so poor they didn't have running water. They had outhouses. They were that poor. But he's super, super smart, and he was super, super willing. He really always loved computers. So in our society, people can move around much more. It's also the truth in India. The high-tech industry has permitted enormous amounts of social mobility there, which is, I think, a good thing. But the whole idea here is whatever it is that we end up doing, that is not you. That's the body does the action, the mind and the intellect have the thoughts and the feelings about it. But the self in me is never touched. Now, many of us get our egos caught up in what we do. I have a friend who used to make $300,000 a year in outside sales in the telecom industry. He just say had some personal troubles. And now he's in a job where he's only making about $40,000, $50,000 a year. He has a hard time not looking back with regret. Oh, I messed up. I had it so good and I destroyed my life, blah, 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 blah. But here what Krishna is saying is our worth needs to be rooted in who we are. That divine spark within everyone. We may be more successful in the world's eyes, but the self in me is the self in you. There's no difference. So here Krishna helps us set aside false arrogance and false low self-esteem, which may be rooted in our apparent success or failure or status in the world. How much we suffer or how much peace we have is not dependent on how high or low our social position is or economic status. If we're caught up in the various struggles of ego, we're going to suffer. If we have serenity, doesn't matter what the conditions are. Mind you, I'm not saying there's a virtue in poverty. I'm saying it's apples and oranges. My kingdom is not of this world, as Jesus said. It's independent of the world's circumstances. Any thoughts on this? All right, we have time for some questions before we sit. Any questions about anything we've covered tonight or anything else in your practice you want to talk about? Am I still online? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Practically speaking, whatever job we're in or whatever education we have, when the mind says, oh, I wish I'd gone to Yale, and been a rich attorney, it would have been so much better. That's an illusion. It would have just been different. Or, oh, I'm so glad I have a Stanford degree. That means I'm just a little bit more important than the person who went to Cal State. No, it's just different. That's all. That's all it is. Helps us begin to have common ground with the entire human condition. Helps free us from envy and jealousy. No comments, no thoughts? All right, we'll have a meditation then.